So happy Memorial Day to all of our followers, and welcome to another episode of the Urban Files, where we discuss all of the latest developments and happenings in the urban landscape, what we love about the cities that we work, live, and play in. So, Max, how are things going for you?
Hey, great. I mean, getting ready for another flight on this long journey we're on around North America.
Nice,
But
nice.
it's an exciting time as always. We also got
Absolutely.
we also got a game seven in the NHL.
Oh,
So
yeah, yeah. Rangers and Hurricanes. We'll see who my Lightning are playing then, huh?
right, you're right, exactly. So speaking of the NHL, earlier this year, you got to experience the NHL Stadium Series in Nashville. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah. So it was, now don't get me wrong. I've been blessed really beyond measure with all of the sporting events that I've been able to get to throughout my life. Being a diehard fan of Cleveland teams and Ohio State growing up, I was able to make it to an NBA Finals. I was able to make it to the national championship. I went to a Rose Bowl and a World Series. So the sports bucket list for me, in a sense, was probably not as long as the proverbial sports bucket list for other people. But one of the things that I'd really say was a must on their left, and in some ways, I wouldn't say I grew up a diehard hockey fan, but getting to a winner like a stadium series, because it just puts hockey as a sport in such a different light than what it's played throughout the regular season. And I guess it's kind of a throwback to how they used to play games, but it really is such an exotic feeling event. And so it's always been something since they started the whole event in like 2007 that I wanted to check out. And so I, of course, am a Lightning fan, having moved to Tampa around 6 years ago. And so, and I heard they were playing in Nashville, which is a really fun, happening, and not too far away city. I had to be there. And it it exceeded and lived up to the expectations. What you can see behind me is maybe the one con is actually from the fandom perspective, just the Civic Stadium. Obviously, you have a cool view, but the players really do look like ants, much more so than they would in an NFL context, even because they're kind of just on a smaller level and kind of faster moving around the turf. But also, you're much higher up probably than even like the nosebleeds at a NHL arena. Probably realistically, the NHL nosebleeds would be about where those red seats you see behind me are.
Mhm.
And frankly, I'm probably sitting more up where you see the upper, like actually, I don't want to exaggerate it, but if you see the Batman building there kind of in the center, I'm kind of hanging off that actually. So that was how high up I was, because it was an expensive ticket, but the atmosphere, and it felt really like going to like a World Cup match, or what I'd imagine that to be like, with people traveling from all around. I think Tampa brought like 25 or 30,000 people. And especially if you're in a downtown stadium like that, I think it made the event so much better. People filing across in mass from Broadway Street to the game and all of that stuff. I think, not to discount next year's that will be, I think, in Raleigh, North Carolina, but it's kind of in a suburban setting. And this is one of the rare NFL stadiums where it's right downtown. And gosh, I know we have some differing opinions in the urban sphere about a downtown NFL stadium, but it really made for a incredible environment down there.
Yeah, so where is this stadium, the football stadium, obviously, in relation to the NHL stadium that where the Predators usually play?
So the NHL stadium is right in the heart of Broadway. So Broadway downtown, that's actually like Nashville's main drag of sorts, and almost like a Times Square of the South in a sense, with how peak traffic and nightlife and activity there is, especially really, I'd say probably the busiest intersection in the entire city, at least on this weekend, was that intersection of Broadway that kind of met with the arena there. And I'll go ahead and actually jump over. It was an entire weekend of festivities. They had a big outdoor park that was kind of aside there. And so just to give you an idea, this was what it looked like earlier in the day on Saturday. And it's right next to, actually in the back right there from me, facing me, of course, it's the Country Music Hall of Fame, which you see appropriately enough is a piano keyboard in its design. So that's kind of cool. But just, just events and giveaways and just a massive humanity all up and down Broadway throughout the weekend. So it makes me want to get back to Bridgestone for a game too, because I mean, as good as the Nissan location is, this one is right in the heart of things.
Yeah. So attendance wise, it was how much larger than the standard game at Bridgestone?
Yeah, so Bridgestone is a pretty popular ticket. I think it's kind of, obviously it's the Sun Belt, so I don't think there's really necessarily a ton of diehard hockey fans, although the Lightning, I gotta say, did lead the league in attendance this year. So Michael Wilbon, sit down on that, right? The whole thing. But in terms of it's a pretty good draw, but Bridgestone only seats about 18 or 19, as probably similar par with most NBA arenas. This thing had, I think, more than most. I think it might have had more than any Titans game all season, actually, in fact. So I think the Purdue-Tennessee Music City Bowl might have been the highest grossing attendance this year at 69,000. But if I remember right, this might have been it might have been borderline like a top 10 attendance event in the history of the stadium, just because I think they were able for this to have a slightly larger capacity. And it was packed. I mean, like, we were close to the last row, and even up there, it was like basically sitting on people's laps, which
wow.
I have to admit, being a 30-degree evening, which I'm not used to, that was kind of nice because it kind of helped me bundle up for warmth. I also was wearing one of my N95 masks as a figurative scarf. I was probably one of the few people still wearing a mask in the crowd, but I found that it had multiple uses in that case.
So, well, I mean, that's impressive. To me, that means that they have created sort of a very festival, can't miss kind of atmosphere around what really is just a regular season
game. Yeah, it's really just one of 82 or whatever they have, but it's the special feel of it, right? And I think obviously Tampa was a perfect ripe fan base of any Sunbelt team to make it, having been repeat Stanley Cup champions. They traveled very well. I would say probably 40% of the audience was Bolts fans.
Okay.
But Nashville was there, and they were pretty active as well. And they had probably one of the more distinctive and interesting goal chants that I've seen too. So a very rabid fan base for Nashville. I mean, if not for the Predators, they were very into the game, and it was. I mean, at halftime of the first intermission, they had Miranda Lambert and Dierks Bentley come out and give a concert. They had basically actually at every timeout whistle they had someone. They had Lit doing My Own Worst Enemy sometime during the third period, which that's your timeout performer. They really had some serious musical people back there, So yeah.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I would also imagine that just a regular season game actually at Bridgestone would not draw that many Tampa fans.
So, no, I think for sure it was definitely a novelty thing. I mean, don't get me wrong. I think if I'm remembering, actually, Nashville might be about the closest other NHL market to Tampa, other than, that team in Sunrise, right? But that is, like, certainly I think there was the novelty and the bucket list component here that made things really special.
Yeah.
So
cool. So tell us a bit more about your overall visit, where you stayed.
Yeah. So we were, originally it was going to be my whole family, my daughter and my wife and stuff. And my wife was sick, kind of had a bad cold, and just did not, want to travel with that. So I ended up going solo, and I had booked
Left her
us.
alone with the kid when she was sick,
I
huh?
left her alone with the kids when she was sick. So yeah, that was a big parent win. But considering all the money we dropped in airfare, I think she kind of got that was kind of, we'd have been eating the bill quite a bit there. So sorry, honey. It is what it is. But we'll make it up at some point, right? But in terms of where we stayed, we weren't right downtown. For those unfamiliar, Nashville probably has, as a median average, probably only is rivaled by like New York City, Manhattan for like average hotel prices in the city center throughout the year, and probably even surpasses the cost you would find in Manhattan. I mean, for a lot of these hotels, I mean, we're talking like Motel 6 across the river going for 250 on this particular weekend, and it probably is a little busier because it's an event weekend, but even just some random weekends you check, like if
Yeah.
you want something like a Hyatt or whatever, you're looking at 400, 500. So I booked an Airbnb in East Nashville, which is kind of like a hipster neighborhood, about a mile and a half or two to the east, kind of east northeast of the stadium, and
Mhm.
kind of quiet and residential. But what stood out to me was, I guess for the longest time I thought about Nashville kind of as like a Sunbelt boomtown. And I think that's how a lot of people consider it. And in some ways that's true. It's very fast growing. It has a big IT sector, a lot of music, a lot of people moving there, all that stuff. But the general aesthetic and vibe was much more Midwestern, like if in terms of the architecture, in terms of the way that things were laid out, kind of more like civic architecture that I found really impressive in the way that things were. Um, you had this really big critical mass of density kind of right behind me on Broadway that stood out. But other than that, the city was pretty leafy and kind of spread out, like where I think you could get from city to country in Nashville much easier than in a lot of places. And I'll actually show kind of some evidence of some of the things I'm talking about here. So in terms of the civic architecture, most people that have some base level of familiarity of Nashville are familiar with Centennial Park and the Parthenon. It's just west of Vanderbilt, which of course is one of our elite institutions in the country, and so it's a very nice place to walk around. Frankly, I went in the museum, but if I'm being honest with you, I probably would not do so. I'm glad I got the experience, and it was cool to learn a bit more about that building and the original Parthenon. But I would not. I would probably just go there, and there's like a lot of like Vanderbilt students doing IM sports, really cool gathering places, and kind of the type of public space that I kind of wish we had more of in Florida, and more like something I feel like you'd see in a Midwestern northern city on average.
Mhm.
Um, as said, I mean, I think Tennessee is actually the only Eastern state, and I think maybe one of like 3 or 4 states total where it's cities specifically as a state mandate have an urban growth boundary kind of at the outer edges. So this is Percy Warner Park, and it's, I believe, the largest metropolitan park in the state of Tennessee. It's only 10 miles from downtown Nashville and stuff, and it feels a world away. I mean, there's dozens of miles of trails in there, great hillside views, actually real topography, which
Mhm.
for a Floridian especially is a treat. So that was really cool. And then even like just right in the city, you can kind of see a lot of that kind of, I guess, roost and herb is what like the traditional description of that is. This is something called Love Park. It's actually just overlooking Vanderbilt. And if it was just a little bit closer, you can make out the Vanderbilt football stadium behind me. So you could almost watch for free. But like Vanderbilt games are probably free anyway. So that's not really. But but overall, I mean, yeah, those are the things that stood out to me. It's has more civic character than a lot of Sunbelt cities do. And it has a specific attention to actually kind of including nature in the city, which I was impressed by.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, cool, cool. Personally, it's Nashville is one of the places that I don't know that well. I've been a few times, but I don't have a very strong impression of it. But Yeah, what you're describing jives with my recollection and my impression. It's like a very, very strong urban core, and I think that's the part that really sets us apart from other sort of sun belts.
Oh yeah,
uh,
yeah. I mean, like,
for,
yeah,
for its size especially. But then as you get away from that center, you're gonna, it quickly changes.
yes, yes. Oh yeah,
Into this more impressive sort of topography and natural area that you're
yeah.
describing.
Well, in terms of like what I think about, because like you always hear about Nashville as like an it city or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and it's surprising, because you think about it, kind of capital, magnet, center place, and that capital really is the magnet. But if I think about it truly, like it's Davidson County, which has Nashville, is probably only about half, maybe a little less than half the population of Hillsborough County, which is Tampa in population, and that's over about the same area. And even, just as a metro area as a whole, it's probably only about 40% of Tampa's population. But like, I think the way in which it's growing and the attention on the core and just kind of the attention to detail here, this is the lobby of Union Station, which, Grand Central Train Hall, right? Like,
Mm.
I think it's kind of like, not to hate on Atlanta, because there's a lot of things about Atlanta as a city and a region that I love about it, but it's kind of more the downtown you'd think in Atlanta might have, compared to a Nashville having something more modest, where in fact, honestly, it's the other way around. I mean, like, Atlanta obviously has a booming metro region and a lot more amenities overall as a city in terms of the airport, in terms of fine arts and all that stuff and diversity. But Nashville's core is just booming, and it's booming and it's character filled, and that is something you can't find everywhere, especially in our southern US.
Yeah, yeah, very true, very true. Is there anything else you'd want to add?
Yes, there is actually. So the big point that I wanted to make, and this is not to go on some major political diatribe, because I really don't like to get political on this show. I want this to be a place of unity and where we can kind of discuss ideas. But one of the things coming out of Nashville is, they're talking about how Nissan Stadium is inadequate and how they need a new one. And I think you and I have discussed this earlier, and, everyone has their thoughts and opinions on it. Basically, what they said was that they would need about 900 million for what they were looking to do in terms of restorations. So they figured, well, let's just build a new $2 billion stadium because that's what we want. And what I like is that I think it's kind of more split up between the state and the city. And I think the financing of that big check is a little bit more balanced too. But what I don't like is this stadium, if you actually really look at it, it's not Cowboy Stadium, it's not SoFi, but it's not bottom 10 in the league. And it has a great location. It has relatively nice modern-ish facilities, and it just feels like a greedy cash grab from the owner of the Titans in advance when it's needed. I mean, if it truly is that outdated by 2040, okay, I mean, I guess I get it if that's the way things are going. But if you really look around the world, like, I mean, this would probably, even among the elite EPL and La Liga clubs, they probably don't have a facility this advanced,
Mm-hmm.
if we're being honest. I mean, look at San Siro in Milan. But like, that's the big thing. I don't like the idea of a city continuing to just bend over for the team because there's some abstract threat of them moving out.
Yeah, no, I'm in total agreement with you. I haven't looked too carefully at the current condition of the stadium. You obviously got to experience it, but you make a great point that if it's still a very worthwhile functioning stadium and not that outdated, then it does seem to be sort of
Yeah.
an owner and somewhat a league in total kind of leveraging its power just to
Yeah.
take what it can.
And the NFL is king there. I mean, it's had a faster replacement rate than any of these other leagues at this point, where I mean, something like I guess if we're gonna talk about Buffalo, getting theirs, but Buffalo Stadium was from 1968, so I feel like I can forgive that maybe modestly more, although their public school system that is not getting funded is in debt and they're cutting teachers. So,
Yeah. Yeah. This is a whole nother show, and actually we have discussed this on the show previously. So we don't want to get too bogged down. We're kind of running out of time as it is. but yeah, you're totally right. Whole nother discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was an amazing weekend, Nashville, and I definitely hope to get back there to see one at Bridgestone too. Hopefully another Bolts win, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that'd be great. I definitely want to get back up there as well. I think one other thing you mentioned earlier was the hotel prices, and I agree with you from my limited experience. And I wonder, I guess now that you brought it up as well, I wonder this really might be a thing that hotel prices in Nashville are just insanely
astronomical
high. For the size of the city. It does seem that way. I've done a lot of traveling. I do a lot of hotel searches, and I have noticed that just from my limited experience. So it's interesting. I wonder what those dynamics are. Maybe that's something we can.
One of the more insightful city data posters, and I don't want to mention a specific name, but kind of Miami based, mentioned, you could get one for those prices. He's looking at maybe even slightly cheaper in Manhattan, or getting like basically a high-end 5-star hotel in Sao Paulo, which that's going to have the dollar difference there. But it's a fair point, and I don't know, is Nashville just that popular, or is there just that much of a demand for new hotels in the city? I think it's some of both.
It's clearly has to do with supply and demand, because the city is not a very large city compared to most of the large metros around the country. We're talking about somewhere around 30 to 35 population wise in the US. And it's not like most of the other items, cost of living items are much higher. It's really just hotels, which is interesting to me. I mean, certainly they're a hot destination for many different things. But there's not seemingly a lack of supply of hotels either. So I don't know. Yeah, there's something.
It seems like the Nash Vegas moniker really seems to ring true. I mean, among bachelor and bachelorette parties I hear about, 10 years ago, everyone used to go to Vegas or New Orleans, and I don't know about you, but just through my wider social circles and social media, it seems like everyone is going to Nashville when they're going out for a party weekend or celebrating something. They're going to Nashville. That's more common almost than anywhere else.
Well, yeah, probably true. But Vegas,
anecdotal, of course, but
Vegas hotels aren't that expensive.
No.
So it is interesting. It might be something that we dig into. Analyze at some point.
Definitely.
So, all right. As always, Chuck.
Yes, it's great.
Nice chat.
Have a good one, everyone.
All right. Bye-bye.